John Cooper. Now, I have talked a lot, and I do it every July. I love talking about the pioneers. It just fills my soul. We've talked a lot about their sacrifices, how hard it was, and we know it was. But this story really puts a fine point on that. John Cooper was born in Leicestershire, England, the son of James and Anne North Cooper. When John was only 2 years old, his father was killed. John's mother was unable to care for him, so she sent him to live with a wealthy uncle, a bachelor, who provided much of the world's goods and a quality education to John. His uncle also insisted that John learn a trade, so John became a skilled cobbler, a shoemaker. John was described by those who knew him as, quote, a nice-looking man with brown eyes and dark, wavy hair. He stood 5 foot 10 inches tall and weighed 160 to 170 pounds. He was very athletic and took part in all kinds of sports of his day. He was one of the fastest foot racers in England, end of quote. It is even said that he won a race and was presented to Queen Victoria. Well, one day, John and some of his mates stopped to hear some street preachers. John said the words of the preachers and the songs that they were singing kept ringing in his ears, and he couldn't erase them from his mind. Well, you know the rest of the story. John joined the church, and in so doing, he was kicked out, turned out by his uncle, and disinherited. That's quite a sacrifice. From 1854 to 1856, John served as a missionary there in his native land. The details I don't know, but somewhere along the way there, he met Mary Ann Lewis. They were engaged to be married, but decided to wait until arriving in Zion to be sealed. Well, they came on to America, to Iowa City, and were assigned to travel with Ben Hodgett's wagon company in late '56. When winter snows came on the 19th of October, you know this, there were 4 companies stranded out in what would later be described as one of the worst winters in memory in Wyoming. Those companies, of course, were the Willie and Martin handcart companies and the Hodgett and Hunt wagon companies. It was decided by the leaders and rescuers that they would unload all of the personal goods in the wagons of the Hunt and Hodgett companies in order to load those wagons up with suffering saints who could no longer walk, those from the handcart companies. So the goods were offloaded and stored in Old Fort Seminoe, which is right there near Devil's Gate in Wyoming. Then a meeting was called, presided over by Captain George D. Grant. And it was discussed, how would we protect these valuable goods that belonged to the immigrants? 20 men were asked to remain behind through the winter and guard those goods. Among those asked was John Cooper. The minutes of that meeting show that Captain Grant said to them, quote, "It was a great trust reposed in those men appointed to remain, and he wanted them to guard and care for it more so than if it belonged to them individually. He wanted, get this, he wanted no half or chicken-hearted men to remain, but men with large souls, men of integrity, men of God who would not do a wrong thing, would not steal one from another. If any such were among them, he wanted them to be passed through the Devil's Gate, and he did not want any grumblers or fault finders." And then he concluded he believed the men remaining were good men and would not go to do anything wrong. In regards to their food and survival in the bitter winter, Captain Grant said, quote, that he anticipated they would have hard times, but they had no need or had no they need have no fear of starving. Why? Because they could kill buffalo and antelope. End of quote. Well, just before Captain Grant pulled out, the man appointed to watch over the 20, to lead the 20, Daniel Webster Jones, faced all of the 20 men and said, "This is your last shot. If any of you want to go on with the company, speak now. Otherwise, we're here for the long haul." Well, now as to the food, that assessment proved overly optimistic on Captain Grant's part. Family records say that John Cooper, told his children many times how they night herded the cattle to keep the wolves from attacking them, until the danger of the wolves attacking the men became too great. So they couldn't guard the cattle. The cattle became so poor and were dying so fast that the men guarding the goods killed the cattle to save them for food. One man among them was an expert butcher, and he prepared the meat, expecting to eat only the best and keep the rest for wolf bait. But the wolves didn't get any of the offal from the cattle. The men were obliged to eat every bit of it themselves, even the hides and the hooves. They suffered with cold and hunger. They dug under the snow for onions and sagos. Their rawhides were scalded to take off the hair and cooked and eaten to keep off starvation. Continuing the quote, they were in a starving condition, and many of them were very sick because of eating rawhides. John said that their constant prayer was that God would bless their stomachs and adapt them to the kind of food they were forced to eat. When help finally arrived, they had their saddle straps soaking, preparing to cook and eat them. The men were so thin, the men who stayed behind to guard those goods, they were so thin they could hardly walk. Get this, John Cooper went into Fort Seminoe on November 2nd, weighing about 160 pounds. He came out weighing 80. Moreover, John did not arrive in the valley until June 6th, 1857. 2 days later, half the man he once was, he married Mary Ann in the endowment house. He had proven himself a man able to do hard things. And then, in so few words, but conveying so much, John later wrote, quote, "We must not expect everything to run smooth." End of quote. Very, very wise counsel indeed.